Houston Dynamo, Portland Timbers, Sporting Kansas, Los Angeles Galaxy,
Pitch Pass,
Toronto FC, Real Salt Lake, Chicago Fire, Columbus Crew, FC Dallas, New York Red Bulls.
Pitch Pass, your all-access credential to the people that matter in MLS. Here's your host, Greg Roach.
Why, hello there. Welcome to another edition of Pitch Pass. Have you been to pitchpass.com? You should. It's all revamped for the 2013 season. It looks very, very, very pretty, and I invite you to check it out. And while you're there, subscribe to the podcast in some way. There's many chances and places for you to do it. If you choose to do it through iTunes, I'm going to keep reminding you, please rate the podcast. Leave a comment. That'd be even better, but I don't want to push my luck. At the very least, though, tell a couple of your MLS-loving friends about this here podcast so that maybe we can, spread the word a little bit. Got a good episode for you lined up from centerlinesoccer.com. The always insightful Robert Jonas will be on to talk about the San Jose Earthquakes as they get ready to start their season, as everybody in MLS gets ready to start their season, including the Columbus Crew. They start their season on Saturday, March 2nd in California, Home Depot Center against Chivas USA. The man between the sticks for that match will be Andy Gruenebaum, and he joins us right now on Pitch Pass. Hi, Andy. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm great. And now I'm sure you probably get this all the time, but this is the first time we're actually calling like a landline, a hotel thing. So when I called, I had to get patched through to your room, and they said, "Well, who is it?" And I give your name, and they're like, Grooney?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And actually, my wife went from Sims to Gruenebaum.
Oh, jeez.
And my wife's sister went from Sims to Scheffelbein. So
wow.
I'm sure the whole family's just a little torn up there, but it is what it is.
Let me ask you a question, because my last name is Roach, and we get that gets a lot of stares when we go out, like we have reservations or anything. Do you use an easier name when you make reservations? Because we use Grant. That's our dinner reservation name.
Actually, yeah, I use Green.
Oh, okay. So you do use a pseudonym.
Yeah, we use Green just because, if you try and do Gruenebaum over, reservations, it's a nightmare.
Yes.
Over the phone, they have to type it in 4 or 5 times. And then also, my friends for the longest time just call me G-Bomb because you take out the middleman, there's no spelling errors, so.
So you're Green.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
when you're on the road, it'll keep all of the opposing fans from storming your room. Just know it's under Green.
I think you're mistaken. This is the wrong sport. I don't think we have any opposing fans that are getting too crazy at hotels. None that I've encountered anyway. So, and if they try and get to me, they should raise their standards. That's what I think.
So you guys right now are in Orlando. You're wrapping up for the Disney Pro Soccer Classic, and I guess the big question I have to ask you while you're on the road: does the bunny accompany you?
I wish, man. It's been almost I don't know. I can't even tell you how many weeks it's been since I've seen her, but it's just people say it's just a bunny, but it's my pet and she is amazing, and I've been FaceTiming with my wife and my bunny almost every night, and I'm dying to get home to see her. And so yeah, it's been miserable, but hopefully she remembers who her dad is, and we can take time to bond again when I get home.
I was gonna say, Andy, because when you first started your answer, I'm thinking to myself, does he think I mean his wife when I said bunny? Because that's the way you're talking, as if this is a treasured loved one that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with.
We're giving her the best home. If they don't have like the longest. They live 5 to 8 years, and we've already talked about how devastating that's going to be when we have to cross that bridge. But we won't think about that. But yeah, actually, I talk about her like she's my daughter. I'm very protective of her, and she's brought us so much joy, to be honest with you. I'd never thought like I'd ever say that about a bunny, but she's been amazing. And honestly, though, people ask me all the time, do they act like a what do they do? I mean, it's a bunny rabbit.
Yeah.
But she thinks she's a dog, to be honest with you. She thinks she's a dog, and she rolls over sometimes. She I mean, she's just incredible.
What is her name? What is her name?
Her name is Rue, like R-O-O, like kangaroo.
Oh, like kangaroo, yeah, from the Winnie the Pooh.
Yep.
Nice.
And the other thing is my parents, you know, my brother and I are both married, and they're worried that they're not going to have any grandchildren because both my brother and myself have bunnies as well. Like my brother's wife had a bunny going into their relationship, and they actually had two, and one of them died, and then they still have one, and they have a dog. So my mom thinks she's going to be stuck with grand bunnies.
Your mom and dad are probably thinking, what did we do to instill this love of bunnies in our sons?
It's just one of those things where both of our wives grew up with bunnies or had bunnies, and you know, just I was told a long time ago if we were ever going to get a pet, it would be a bunny. We're not getting a dog, and so I kind of just compromised with it. I love animals, and so that was the biggest thing. Was I got to the breaking point where I wanted a pet so bad that I just went to the Ohio State Fair and found this one. So.
Well, take solace in the fact this time next week you'll be back in your bunny's arms.
I will do that, trust me.
Now, the season is coming up. It's quickly approaching. Do you guys feel that you're ready after your time in Florida?
Yeah, I think we've had a successful run here. We've had, you know, a good string of victories, and things have been not necessarily the smoothest at times, but I think with all the new players we have in camp and with all the turnover that's happened, I'd say it's been a success, and we just have to carry that on into the regular season.
Your team last year, the Crew, I think definitely flew under the radar. Kind of people put you guys to the side at the beginning of the season, and then once you picked up Higuain, everything started to click for you guys. And by the end of the season, you were the team I thought that nobody really wanted to play. Is that kind of attitude and mentality? Are you going to be able to transfer that from the end of 2012 into 2013?
Yeah, I think so. I think we learned a lot from what happened last year and not making the playoffs, and just being able to close out. You know, if we were able to maybe close out one more game, we would have been there. And that's a tough pill to swallow. You know, a long off season and then right back into it for this year. So I think we can take some of those things from last year and sort of that mentality where we were right there. We were, like you said, flying under the radar. And no, I don't think anybody did want to play us. I think early on we weren't conceding very many goals, and then when Pipa, Federico Higuain, and Jairo came aboard, we were scoring goals, but we were leaking goals, and so I think hopefully we've been able to find that consistency on both ends, and that'll just make us even more dangerous when we're playing for the zero on our end and they're scoring goals up top. So.
That's a great jump-off point to a question that I got for you on Twitter, and the question was, are you a member of the good keeper, no defending club like Dan Kennedy? I know for a fact you're going to say I'm not a member of that club, but defend your back line.
I mean, look at all the turnover we had on that back line last year. I mean, we did give up, a lot of shots and a lot of chances, but at the same time, I wouldn't trade those guys for anything. It's tough to come in and out of the lineup. You had guys stepping up and playing hard, and a lot of injuries, consistent injuries, and one guy would come back, another one would go by the wayside again, and you just never had that continuity, and I think that's a big factor. And plus, over my career, from college to club, I've always played on teams that give up a lot of shots, and it's more fun for me. But at the same time, those guys really did the best that they could with the situation with Chad going in and out and et cetera. It's tough when you don't have that continuity. You do your best to fill the gaps, and we do have the players to step in and do the job, and I think they proved that last year especially.
So where are you guys at? I'm talking about the defense and the back line specifically, as far as health-wise at this point in the preseason as you get ready for your opening match?
I think we're pretty healthy right now. I think we're finding our groove as far as consistently putting out a back four that has been starting with Tyson and Glauber and Chad, and Josh Williams can play either in the center or outright, and he's proven he's an unbelievable asset to the team because, of that ability to play in either position. And we have other guys that can fill in that have done it, that have spent some time on the first team. But right now, I think everyone's healthy. Everything's ready to go. I think we just have to continue to gel over our last game here and then our last few training sessions leading into the regular season, and I think we'll be fine.
He's kind of an X factor, but you've played with him now for a few weeks. What can we expect from Glauber as a member of Columbus Crew and in MLS?
Well, he's just another big body that I think his positioning's been great so far. I think he's got some leadership qualities, and I think he's a good complement to Chad there. You got a couple twin towers in the back there that really kind of use their body well. And Chad's when he's healthy, he's obviously the best defender in the league, and I think Glauber could be right there with him. I think it's just going to take some time for those two to gel, and I think so far so good. I really enjoy what's going on in front of me, and I think they're going to make my lives a lot easier.
Are they similar players?
In a way, in certain ways they are. I mean, Chad's just a big body and he's got a huge head. The ball just finds him, and unfortunately, sometimes when he's not looking, the ball has found his head, which is something we're trying to avoid. But with Glauber, though, I'm still trying to figure him out a little bit, and it seems to me that they're both positionally pretty sound, and Chad's an unbelievable one-on-one defender, and so far Glauber's been a monster in the air as well as Chad. So in some respects they're very similar, and then in other respects, they kind of have different sort of bodies and different kind of skill sets as well.
I was looking up some videos of you, and the first one that comes up is from thecrew.com, and it's a vote for you, and so it's a nice music video. Set to the sweet tones of MC Hammer's "Here Comes the Hammer."
Yeah.
And I just in my head I think to myself, as they're putting the video together, they probably got a couple of songs in there. They're pretty good, and then you come in and go, "It sounds great, but I kind of need 'Here Comes the Hammer.' I mean, I am the Hebrew Hammer. I need MC Hammer. 'Here Comes the Hammer,' and I'm not going to sign off on this video unless you make it 'Here Comes the Hammer.'" Is that what happened behind the scenes?
That is not what happened at all. That nickname has followed me since college, and it's just funny that I don't even know how it ended up here, because I thought it would just be dead and buried when I got drafted by the Crew and left college, because it was just something my roommates came up with from that movie, The Hebrew Hammer, and so all that stuff's great, and I had no idea that was going on, but it's great. But at the same time, it's like you just got to move on, and what happened last year, and I just really want to focus on having another good year. But if I had to pick a different song,
yes, what would your new song be? Because I think everything you just said could be summed up in they used MC Hammer for my theme music. And then that explains everything about wanting to leave the nickname in the past, wanting to put it away. That could all be summed up with, they used MC Hammer for my theme music.
No, actually, that nickname has led to some pretty funny chants from our supporter section, and they get wittier every year. So I've actually kind of enjoyed it, and I think my parents have enjoyed it, and it's kind of just grown. And I don't. Now it's not. It used to be where like, oh, that's funny. Where'd you hear that? But now it's kind of been consistent over the years. So it's no problem for me. But as far as the songs go, I'm a pretty big music fan myself, and there's so many to choose from. It's probably on what day you catch me that I'd want whatever song. So probably something from Slash though.
Nice, like Slash's Snake Pit or Guns N' Roses Slash.
Like Slash and Miles Kennedy.
Nice, fantastic.
Yep.
I always say Miles Kennedy, one of the best voices in rock music.
It's been that way for a long time, and actually one of my best friends from high school told me about him before I even realized he was doing an album with Slash, or on the first album Slash came out with where he collaborated with all those other artists. But this guy is incredible. it was really fun. I went out to L.A. to visit my brother, and I saw Slash and Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators out there, and it was one of the best concerts I've ever been to.
Have you heard his Alter Bridge stuff?
Yes,
okay.
I have definitely heard his Alter Bridge. Have the DVD concert from Amsterdam.
Hello, Miles Kennedy's biggest fan.
It's good stuff.
All right, so I wanted to give you a second because this was kind of breaking news, and that's the Will Hesmer retirement. I want to get your thoughts on Will and where your head is at with him retiring.
Yeah, sure. I think I've known sort of from talking to Will myself that he was thinking about retiring, and he's always kind of had a backup plan, and he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Actually, he's just really bright guy, very knowledgeable in all different aspects of life, and so he's a very good source of knowledge for me. And anytime I ever had a question about anything financial or anything else, I kind of have steered to Will first. And so he's been a great friend and a great teammate, and someone who I've learned a lot from over the years about being a good professional, and just really going to miss him around the locker room. Even though we were competing, he's a great locker room guy to have, and an admirable fantasy football player.
Oh, admirable.
Yes.
That means you beat him.
No, I did win the league.
What's up,
he
humble
never
brag?
Did, but I'd say as far as consistency goes, he's been the better consistent owner. I've had better teams on paper, but he's really over the years been more consistent.
But
I do have a championship to my name.
I was going to say
he doesn't.
Your highs have been higher. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly.
All. And then the other news, and I love that this doesn't seem to be a big deal as it pertains to the sport, is your former teammate Robbie Rogers coming out and saying that he is gay. And I love the fact that it within the MLS community, at least the players that tweet, which you don't, by the way, but it seems to be the general thing is, fine, cool, let's move on. Why do you think that it's not a huge situation in MLS locker rooms as it kind of was trying to be played up as we got into Super Bowl week as far as the NFL is concerned?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. It's a hot button topic for some reason, and whether it's for religious reasons or otherwise, it's just something that is a hot button issue, and it's one of those things where, for me personally, it's just I just kind of have always been taught to be a good person, and it doesn't really matter. I think religion causes a lot of problems in a lot of different ways, and so does that other stuff, and I just kind of was raised to be a good person, and and just try and do that, and good things will follow. And Robbie was just that. He was a good person. He is a good person, and and so this news is just. It just doesn't matter to me, and I'm sure a lot of other guys feel the same way. And there may be a lot of other guys that don't feel that way and just are just going to keep quiet. But I just think that be who you want to be, and that's sort of how I've always just be a good person, and Robbie is, and the rest will follow. So without breaking
the sanctity of the locker room, was it a surprise to you?
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to lie. It was definitely a surprise, but it was just one of those things where actually I found out when a local reporter from Columbus traveled with us asked me about it, and I just kind of was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I mean, whatever, I just kind of did a double take, and that was it. So it really wasn't a big deal. It's just the thing about it is, obviously Robbie's a high profile guy, and it would make news whether he was or not, as an athlete. But the thing is it's nobody's business. It's something that we obviously it'll make big news and this and that. But in the end, we're talking about a human being, and for anybody to say something negative about that is wrong in my opinion. And that's the beauty of I guess America is you have your own opinion, and I just think that Robbie's a great guy, and it doesn't matter how he feels about anything. He's been a great ambassador for Columbus over the years. He helped us win a championship, and really and truthfully, those are the things I'm going to remember about Robbie. So,
Will, the biggest thing you remember about this Orlando preseason trip will it be medieval times?
I ever since Cable Guy, I've always wanted to go, and a group of us went, and I'll tell you what, it was a blast. We were actually put with the Yellow Knights, so it was like black and yellow
perfect
colors, and the guy actually, I know it's predetermined, sorry to ruin that for everyone, but the guy actually won, and so it was coincidence. So we think MLS Cup might not be too far fetched after all. It may be a sign from the gods, if you will, from the Game of Thrones. We'll see. But it was a great time, and I'm pretty sure if we go back, the Blue Knight might retire. We were in this guy's head all night. So
I don't really appreciate you using the Pitch Pass podcast as a platform to spoil things, Andy. I'm not a fan of that. Okay.
I know. I apologize.
Future people who are planning on trips to medieval times they're hanging their head now with one tear, going, "It's fixed." What?
Tell you what, though, it's people know wrestling is for a lot of things, and they still go. So I'm sure it'll be all right. So
the reason I ask you is because of the now fantastically awesome picture that is making the rounds on the internet. Give us the backstory on the picture.
Well, there's a few. I'm not sure all of them have made it out there on the internet, but there are definitely more. And we took one as we entered, and a bunch of the guys actually purchased it. So I can't say that I contributed to that, but yeah, a bunch of the guys purchased the one we took as a group, and it was said before it even started that no one was going to smile. We were all going to have these sort of, mean looks and going on, and a couple guys didn't get the memo, so that kind of ruined it. But there's some better ones than that. We actually took a photo with the king himself, and we were all bowing down on our knee, and that was a good one. And also with the Yellow Knight, the victor. So.
Of course. So I have to ask you about two people who was a little too eager to throw the crown on, and who did we have to really twist the arm to get the crown on?
I don't think you had to twist anybody's arm.
Get me that crown!
We were in. We were definitely ready. We were looking for him, and so I think who was probably most excited? Eric Garrick put his on pretty quick. I'm not gonna lie. He was pretty excited, and then we all pretty much followed suit pretty quickly. But the girl, there was a tiny, probably like 13-year-old girl sitting on the row below us, and we were giving it to these knights pretty good, but she was yelling off with his head. And so we all kind of just stopped what we were chanting and like looked at each other, and we're like, wow, this girl is serious. Like, she wants to see some bloodshed. So it made for a very interesting night of people watching, and also some good jousting as well.
So the San Jose Earthquakes last year embraced the Goonies. This year, if Columbus wins the MLS Cup, we are putting it all down to the Yellow Knights of the Orlando medieval times.
Oh, for sure. We're gonna come back every year. If we win it, we're gonna come back and cheer on the Yellow Knight every year here in Orlando, whether we're at the tournament or not. We'll just take some time off, and come down. And when this guy eventually is king, he'll just remember us from all the times. We'll probably get VIP seating every time.
That's awesome. Andy, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your time in Florida, and good luck as the beginning of the season is just a week or so away.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
And a reminder, the Crew open up on March 2nd. That's a Saturday in Los Angeles against Chivas USA. San Jose Earthquakes open up at home on Sunday, March 3rd against Real Salt Lake. We mentioned them earlier when we were talking to Andy about the Goonies Never Die. We'll see how they can move into 2013 with all of that great karma they had coming off of 2012. And the man to talk to us about everything earthquake-related is the writer for CenterlineSoccer.com. His name is Robert Jonas, and he joins us right now. Robert, good to talk to you, my friend.
Good to talk to you, too. How's the year starting for you?
I should say talk to you again. We talked last season, and things are going good for me for this year, and things, I think, if you are a fan of the team that you cover, going well for you as well, correct?
Yeah. I not only write, but also sit in the stands with my family, and it was a wonderful season in San Jose.
Unexpectedly wonderful, I would imagine.
I would say so as well. I think if you remember the conversation last year, we thought maybe San Jose would compete for a wild card position, but I don't think anyone had them as Supporters' Shield winners.
So I guess the question is, how much how happy are we and surprised at the season that 2012 was, and how much is that tempered by the results of the actual 2012 season?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit bittersweet. You know, you always like to win a trophy, and the Supporters' Shield is, you know, something with a reward to get you into the Champions League. So I think for San Jose players and fans, that's something that they're pretty excited about. But to go out to your arch rivals in the first round of the playoffs, that's a pretty difficult pill to swallow. And I think, if you talk to the players, if you talk to the fans, longtime observers, everyone's saying the same thing. Maybe don't put it all into the regular season. You have to save something to get it through the playoffs.
So here's my question for you, and we can break down player by player, and I do have some specific players I do want to ask you about. Is there any nervousness that it felt like it was a lightning in a bottle type season, and that long term, and I think even objectively you would be able to say this, that you're not going to be able to count on the late game heroics as often as they happened in 2012, moving into 2013 and in the future?
No, and I think a lot of people have been asking that question. It wasn't just the late-game heroics, the double-digit stoppage time goals. You also had a lot of players have career years.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Wondolowski, Stephen Lenhart, Alan Gordon, the three forwards combined scored 50 goals. No one's going to expect that to happen again, although they're certainly going to try for it. And then, if the occasional comeback here and there is one thing, but to basically they didn't lose any games in that manner, and that's pretty remarkable. And so, that was a big, big difference for them. Taking all the points from Seattle, all the points from L.A. Those are the big rivals in the conference that they were able to surpass and get to first place. So, you can't expect that to happen again, and so you only hope that at least they can stay competitive and, especially this season, stay healthy.
So I've got the names of people that I think you can say, okay, these guys are going to perform, maybe not to the level that they did last year, but you know what to expect from these guys. And that list, from the starters at least, for me is Wando, Bernardez, Morrow, and Beitashour. Is there anybody that I'm forgetting that would basically, you could say, what they were last year is what we can expect from them this year?
Yeah, I think you might add John Bush to that list.
Oh, of course.
Another year older, but as a goalkeeper, he stepped up and made a great save, one after another when necessary. And another player, Sam Cronin. He doesn't get a lot of attention, but kind of playing in that defensive midfield role. I think we're seeing the Cronin that a peak performance. He's not going to probably get any better for you. So, if he can also fulfill and follow that same pattern he has over the last couple of seasons, I think that's a good thing. But I think you're right. Those are the kind of guys that we should pencil in for having seasons that are relatively comparable to what they did in 2012. And
so, where would our expectations be for Lenhart and for Alan Gordon, who is currently injured? Correct?
Yeah, Gordon's not going to start the season. Even Stephen Lenhart might not start the season. And, those are two players that Frankie Alep has been really waiting to get healthy at the same time, because he'd like to play both of them at the same time. Maybe drop Wando down into the midfield and really go strong up top. Those guys have a history of injuries and especially Alan Gordon, and so getting them healthy is going to be a big part of it. They've got a couple guys that they might be able to step into that position. A player, Marcus Tracy, who was a college player of the year, who's coming back from injury as well, but probably won't be ready for a couple of months. Another guy who could step in and play up top for them. So, those guys are the wild cards in terms of can they, show up this season as they did last season. And if they do, that should bode well for a team that definitely has the playoffs in mind.
What do you think the game plan is this season? Because it can't be obviously, hey, let's wait till the 85th minute, we'll bring on Lenhart or Gordon, somebody will score a goal, and away we go. What's the plan to make sure that last year wasn't just a one-off?
You talk to Frank Alep about that, and, people have accused him over the years of being a defensive-minded coach, and he's always sort of, dismissed that as incorrect. And last year it really showed. Once he got his horses in there, the guys that could, bomb up the field, especially out on the wings, create a lot of scoring opportunities. That's what he wanted to see out of his guys. And if that leaves the defense a little bit exposed at times, so be it. If it wasn't for Victor Bernardez in the back, I'm sure the Quakes wouldn't have been in a lot of those games with the ability to have the comeback opportunity. And so if the Quakes can continue to maybe do that, to that same tactic of, pushing forward, especially along the wings, really try to keep their opponents on their back heels, then, that keeps their defense from having to work too hard. And just maybe you outscore the opponent again.
So the plan isn't let's get in shootouts and put all our cards on the table for the end of the match anymore.
I wouldn't think so. I think they know that they're kind of living on borrowed time if they try to do that week to week. It's certainly exciting for fans and very frustrating for journalists trying to file on deadline. But a lot of people aged many years, as Frank Yallop said last season, and they don't want to see that happen again. So this year, maybe a little more methodical in the way they go about the game plan, and players too. Maybe not sort of thinking they can hang back and just go at players in that last 10 minutes.
So there's a couple of guys I wanted to ask you about that we don't know what to expect. Lenhart and Gordon were two of them. I'm glad you brought up Marcus Tracy. I kind of had him on my, hey, what's going on with him? Obviously they're high on him, but is he a guy that they can count on at some point, being that he hasn't featured for the Quakes at all?
I think you have to look at Marcus Tracy as just one of those players that if he is able to contribute, then it's just a bonus, and you're not necessarily relying on him for anything at this point. The Quakes went out and signed Mike Fucito. He's of late of Seattle, Portland, and Montreal last year. I think it was his fourth team in 12 months. A guy who fits the ethos of the Quakes, a hardworking guy. Not necessarily the greatest finisher, but he's going to give you his all up top, and that's going to be the kind of guy they're going to rely on to give them minutes when the big guys are injured or as they're waiting for a guy like Tracy or Jordan to return to action. He's going to have to play a big role as well. The other wild card, and it's a player that's people are very excited about who've seen him play so far, is another Tottenham Hotspur player to replace Simon Dawkins, and that's John Bostock, a 21-year-old attacking midfielder who, if the Quakes can make a loan deal work, they're hoping to get him for at least half the season, maybe the whole MLS season. He's going to be a major upgrade in the Earthquakes attack.
Oh, well, tell me about him. This is kind of breaking news for me.
Yeah, he's a former under-21 captain for England who's been playing with Tottenham for many years. In fact, he's the player with the distinction as the youngest ever starter for Tottenham. And then his career hasn't really gone as planned, and he's played with a lot of other teams on loan from Spurs. And he's out of contract this year, and the Spurs are looking at San Jose and what they did with Simon Dawkins to get his career back on track, and thinking maybe they can do the same with John. He's a really talented, not good-sized attacking midfielder with a rocket of a left-footed shot. And he's played in a couple of the preseason games so far for the Earthquakes. Not necessarily the speediest player, but definitely a talented player and a guy you would love to design your attacking midfield around.
Well, let's talk about the guy that you also mentioned in relation to Spurs. There's got to be a sense of pride in San Jose for the fact that Dawkins was able to go back and go into Aston Villa and now playing for Aston Villa in the Premier League. How much is his loss, at least for the beginning of the season, going to affect San Jose?
I think it could be a big factor. If John Bostock's not in the plans, if they have to go without him, it's going to be a team that won't have that guy in midfield with such a strong composure on the ball. I mean, it's one thing Simon did whenever he was in a game. He could calm things down, collect the possession, hold it just long enough to make defenders run at him, and that allowed other people to get ready. What you're going to see instead is, Shea Salinas is a player ready to go, but he's all about speed and industry, which is a very different style of play, and it basically forces things into a track meet on the end lines. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's certainly a different strategy and something that, Dawkins provided in terms of, keeping the pace of the game at a level all the players could keep up with, as opposed to just trying to outrun people like Salinas likes to do.
The Dawkins situation for the Quakes has been kind of funky ever since he came over, and it's great to have a player like that available, but it's almost been a Juninho on Galaxy situation where it's like, okay, season's over, thanks. I don't know if he's going to be back, and if he is, it could be here or when. Do you see him coming back to the Quakes at some point in the MLS season? And if you do, at what point do the Quakes say, listen, either this guy's on our team or he's not on our team? We just can't be going into the offseason and going into the season with this big question mark with somebody who is important to our plans.
Yeah, no, you mentioned, the uncertainty with Simon. The last two seasons he showed up in the preseason, was on a 6-month loan. They extended each of those loans out to the end of the MLS season. And they were in the same boat this offseason, hoping that they could get another loan agreement made out. Well, Spurs loaned him to Aston Villa, but he's also only under contract through the end of the EPL season. And so in theory, he could be a free agent by the time June rolls around. and be available for any team. And so the Quakes still remain hopeful, as much as everyone hopes him, for the best for him and hopes he can realize his EPL dream, that he just might be available to actually sign outright by the time June rolls around. And so maybe the Quakes will have to wait for him, but he's certainly the kind of player, and Frank Yallop has mentioned this, he's certainly the kind of player that you'll wait for if he becomes available.
Well, but that begs the second question. Is he DP money worthy, and do the Quakes think that he's DP money worthy?
Nothing came out specific on the contract offer, but it was called a very sizable and generous offer, which I have to believe was, would have made him, if not a DP, but very close to a DP. And, the Quakes have been very reticent to spread that kind of money around. I know they're working with Chris Wondolowski right now to get him another new deal as soon as, the preseason gets close to the season. I'm sure they'll announce something on that. Is Dawkins worth DP money? I think if you look at some of the other DPs in the league, you have to say absolutely. But I think the Quakes will try everything they can to keep that figure down if possible. You
brought up one of the three wildcard players that I wanted to ask you about, and that was Shea Salinas. The other one was Marvin Chavez, and then the final one was, wait, hang on, I've forgotten who it is. Mehdi Bellucci. What can we expect from those three guys this year, and can the Quakes count on them with expectations as we go into the season?
Shea Salinas will definitely be starting the season. It looks like everything's set up for the young guy. 6-year pro. He's healthy. He started last season on fire as well. And if it wasn't for Rafa Marquez breaking his collarbone in a rather dirty play, he probably would have continued in that starting role, well into the spring and on. So I think you'll see Shea Salinas starting. Now, Marvin Chavez, he's out for at least a few more weeks with an injury he suffered in the offseason, and it's going to take a little while to get him back to speed again. Those guys that are speedy winger players, they don't just suddenly get healthy, and especially with hamstring and knee injuries. And you mentioned Mehdi Bellucci, a guy who was able to step in and provide a bit of a defensive role for them last season when they picked him up on trade. He's out till at least May or June, it looks like, with his injury situation. He'll be starting the season on the IR. And so, unfortunately, as much as Frank Yallop likes having that kind of presence out there, albeit not an attacking presence, but a guy who can keep the ball, they're going to have to wait on Mehdi until, almost halfway through the season.
Got a lot of holes, Robert, in this team as we start the season.
Yeah, and then I'll quote Frank Yallop. He said he's a little bit nervous right now because, you look at what the projected starting lineup was supposed to be, and it's missing 4, almost 5 players right now. And even the depth players that were expected to step in, there's still a little bit of uncertainty with them. I think you'll see the Quakes, they won't start as strong as they did last season. They probably won't be considered Supporters' Shield contenders by halfway through the season. But if they can get everyone healthy at the right time, the Galaxy have shown that works pretty well.
Yeah.
Then maybe by the end of the season you get primed for the playoff run, and that's where you really can make a name for yourself.
Is the expectation playoffs, or did last season raise the expectation to we want more than just playoffs?
Well, the coaching staff is very, political, if you will. They just say, hey, we're happy to get a top 5 spot. Anything can happen if you can get into the playoffs. Now, from the players, from Ramiro Corrales, Jason Hernandez, the guys who've been around the club a long time, Wando as well, guys that looked at last season with an extreme disappointment at the failure to do much in the postseason. They are targeting not just a playoff appearance, but they want to make that run. They want to make a deep run into the playoffs and show that last year was not necessarily a fluke, or that I should say last year was a fluke in the playoffs, and that they're capable of so much more. So those guys, the vocal leaders, the locker room leaders, they're rallying the troops behind that idea. So I definitely think they're looking postseason, and the regular season is basically just a means to get there.
Living in D.C., I have to live vicariously through you, Robert, so I have to ask you before I let you go, how's that stadium looking?
Well, it is slated to start full construction in the next week, which is great news. Right now it's still sort of a rock pile. After the very well-publicized groundbreaking, it's still sort of a hole in the cement.
Wait. So what's been going on in the months since we did that well-publicized groundbreaking?
A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. According to Dave Cavill, the team president, they've done a lot of design-build work up front so that they could step in and basically just do the construction all in one shot. It's a different style than working on getting permit after permit after permit. They're getting all that stuff done ahead of time so that they can just step in and get this construction done in one shot. So I expect we're going to see some things happen really quickly in the next few months, especially with the winter turning into spring. And they say they're still slated for a season opener next season, 2014 season. They're hoping to have it ready for the first game.
I was just going to ask you that. If it's just a dirt pile right now. So it's still that's still the target of opening day next year in the stadium.
That's the company line, and I know anything can happen, and some stadiums take a while. There's always delays that you're never really sure of, but that's the premise. And given their contractor, it's the same contractor I believe that's working on the 49ers' new stadium, which is the next city over. They put a lot of effort into it. It's not a design that requires, I think, a huge amount of infrastructure work, and therefore, it certainly seems possible that they can get this thing up pretty quickly.
Robert Jonas, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on Pitch Pass and talking all things Quakes.
Always a pleasure.
Pitch Pass.
This is your voice. This is my red, white, and blue. This is my anthem to you.
For more show information, go to pitchpass.com.